Greetings and good Monday morning, the 23rd of May, 2022, third decade of the 21st century. So, today's individualized and somewhat yet random topic is about Supernatural, but most importantly about the Winchesters prequel being produced by Jensen Ackles, and for all intents and purposes, it gives the impression as though he's in it. At least in the trailer, he's in it, which begs the question: has he been brought back to life, or is this before he and Sam are supposed to link up in Stanford? So why don't we go ahead and establish some foundations, and hopefully this is for Supernatural fans, so there's no spoilers. So season 1, in the opener, we have Jeffrey Dean Morgan as John Winchester, and we have Samantha Smith as Mary Winchester. We have a young 3-month-old Sam, which would put Dean at about 3 years of age. Am I right? So 79, 80, 81, 82. So Dean's about 3 to 4 years old. The fun thing about that is Jensen's born in 78, Jared's born in 82, and all they did was they put Dean at 79 and Sam at 83. But anyways, so that's how it opens up. At no point in time are you under any impression that either one of them know anything about the supernatural. Mary wakes up to find that there's somebody in Sam's nursery. Turns out it's Azazel, a prince of hell, who's dripping blood into Sam's mouth because he wants Sam to be one of his special children / warriors for some cause, which we would later find out is because Azazel wants to open the gate to hell, which is all part of the supernatural lore. As we continue throughout the seasons, we would learn that Dean Winchester was chosen to be the vessel for Michael, the Archangel Michael, and Sam was chosen to be the vessel for the Archangel Lucifer, so that they could have their epic divine cosmic battle over the fate of humanity and the earth and whatnot. And they are sent. Dean is originally sent back in time to appreciate and understand why it's so important for John and Mary to get together and learn a little bit more about them. At which point, we find Amy Gumenik playing a young Mary and a Matt Cohen playing a young John. They're a couple. They're already an established couple. And Mitch Pileggi is also playing Mary's father, and I forget the actress's name, but you have Samuel Campbell and Deanna Campbell, and then Mary Campbell, who are from a long line of hunters. So Mary, apparently at a very young age, has been born into and immersed in this hunter world. Based on the hunter lore of Supernatural, hunters don't typically stick around in one place for very long, because essentially what they do is they're constantly on the road chasing the hunt. So we learned that Mary was born into the hunter family, and that she was attempting to give it all up for this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, just all-American, goody-two-shoes John Winchester. And then, of course, the cool thing about it is in that episode, John's looking at a vehicle, and then Dean introduces him to Baby, our 67 Impala. But I digress. So, in a second iteration of time travel, Castiel brings Sam and Dean both back to the future. But I digress. Let me backstep one more. So, as it would turn out, back then, when Dean went back in time, Azazel was making deals with women. Having them basically promise their soul or Long story short, Azazel eventually takes over Samuel Campbell, a.k.a. Mitch Pileggi, kills Deanne Campbell, Mary's mother, and then eventually kills John Winchester. Azazel, in the form of Samuel Campbell, Mitch Pileggi, promises to bring him back if Mary makes an agreement with him, which was eventually to drip blood into Sam's mouth. So there, we established that premise, although this is much later in the show. And then in a second time travel, Anna, who's an angel that was introduced to us early on, decides that she's going to put a stop to this whole Armageddon apocalypse thing, this fight between Lucifer and Michael, by going back in time and killing Mary and John Winchester, thus eliminating Sam and Dean from being born. Castiel gets wind of this, and he grabs Sam and Dean. They go back in time. They reunite with John and Mary, who are now married, and they're a couple. Once again, Amy Gamenek and Matt Cohen. And turns out Mary's pregnant with Dean. Eventually, it gets to the point where Raphael and Anna are coming after... No, Raphael? Uriel. Uriel and Anna are coming after the Winchesters. And long story short, Michael takes over John's body, takes care of everything, erases both John's mind and Mary's mind so that they have no recollection of any of this taking place. And therefore, once Sam, Dean, and Castiel return to their original timeline, John and Mary are none the wiser. Mary has since then left the life. She's pregnant with Dean, and the story progresses. Fast forward to the present, and you get this trailer for the Winchesters that Wayward Winchester was talking about on his channel, and I'll put the link in the description. Going based on the trailer alone, you have two brand new actors. You have a new actress playing Mary and a new actress playing a new actor playing John. I'm assuming because Amy Gamenek and Matt Cohen are no longer age appropriate to play late teens or early 20s. It's supposed to take place in 1972. John has just gotten back from Vietnam, and it's supposed to introduce how he and Mary meet, and how together he and Mary, and some other new characters become hunters. And it also hints at the fact that John's mother knew what his father was into. In Supernatural, we find out that Henry Campbell travels back in time looking for his son, but instead meets Dean and Sam Winchester, tells him the whole story about the men of letters, and that's where we eventually get the bunker. So if you're familiar with Supernatural, you understand all this. So it kind of seems as though they hint at the fact that John's mother, who's in the story, is aware of Henry. So we'll see how that all plays out. The trailer, in my opinion, hints at a completely different telling of the backstory while trying to maintain certain themes. And Wayward Winchester talks about this as well. I'm not really sure. The only way I'll know is if I watch it, because the trailer is just a trailer. You have all new actors. There's going to be some new characters. Potentially some new themes. And here's what I'll point out. In the Supernatural television show, Sam and Dean progressively got better at hunting. Their confidence and courage grew, and so did the monsters. So as the monsters or the villains or whatever, as they grew in capability and so on and so forth, so did Sam and Dean's skill set. We may have been introduced to demons early on, but there was a lot of trepidation. Like, ghosts, okay. Vampires, oh, all right. Werewolves, I mean, in the very first few seasons, at least the first 2 to 3 seasons, there was a lot of trepidation in dealing with certain types of evil, all right? Sam and Dean things weren't as easy for them in the very beginning. So in this trailer, from the outset, they're introducing a demon. or demons, and they're being treated from the trailer's perspective kind of haphazardly. But it's just a trailer, so I don't know. What I'm curious to know is a couple of things. Is this meant to be a standalone story for new viewers? Is it meant to also be a standalone story while being directly tied to the previous Supernatural in an attempt to satisfy new viewers as well as potentially satisfy original viewers of the Supernatural verse? Because I'll admit, I watched it ever since the beginning. Like, I caught the pilot, and I mean, I may not be as fanatical as some, because to me it's not a competition. It was a big part of my wife's relationship, my wife and I's relationship. We'd been married for a year when it debuted. We had just had our first child, and Supernatural was with us all the way into this house. This is the last house we're ever going to live. This is the longest I've ever lived anywhere, from my childhood to adulthood. This house is the longest place I've ever lived anywhere, and Supernatural ended in this house. So it means a lot to us in some way, shape, or form. So I'm curious to see what direction they're going to go. I'm equally curious to see whether or not it's one of those CW Vancouver productions, or if it's going to be produced somewhere else, because Jensen had once said in a panel that the grind of having to go from where he lives in Texas to either LA, where the studio's headquarters are, to Vancouver for filming, so on and so forth, that it put quite a strain on him. So I'm curious to see what his physical involvement's going to be based on geographically where it's being filmed. There's also been rumors that he's now going to be a recurring or permanent fixture on Big Sky, which is on a different network, which for all intents and purposes is filmed on location in Montana. So I'm just curious to see how this is all going to play out. And then, of course, there's that whole backstory of when he and his wife, through their co-founded production company, were trying to get this up and running, how Jared wasn't included and all of this, blah, 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 blah. I think some people lost sight of the fact that before Supernatural was over, so before it had even ceased to exist, the body was cold, you name it, Jared already had Walker in the works. And as far as I know, he had it in the works without Jensen and without Misha. So it seems a little bit disingenuous from our side of the house as fans to get all spun up and drawn into the controversy of, Jensen trying to do something for his career and his livelihood when Jared already went and had Walker up and running. Now, I get what you're saying. The Winchesters is part of the Supernatural, but I understand that. But I don't know. To me, I just feel like it's a weird discussion. It's like, well, why did nobody give a shit that Jared was trying to restart Walker with its own storyline and he didn't include anybody else? But I digress. I'm curious to hear from you. I'm curious to hear from anybody who's a fan of Supernatural and what you think. Are you anxiously anticipating the prequel? Are you anticipating with trepidation? Are you being cautiously optimistic? Are you being open-minded? Are we going to be open-minded enough to the point where, okay, well, this is meant to be a standalone story in conjunction with the pre-existing Supernatural? I mean, I'm very curious. Because let's not forget, at the end of Supernatural, Jack affectionately became God. All right? So he could potentially reset a lot of things if he chose to. And then the one thing that Wayward Winchester talks about is within the canon, Michael wipes their memories. So, in keeping with that faith, is it possible that we can have a prequel that also includes the memory wipe at various points in time where John completely forgets all he knows about hunting and starts fresh, and Mary only knows a certain amount? I mean, we'll see. We'll see if they're going to tell that. And then secondly, this is my second attempt at making this video. The other thing I'm curious about too is So when Sam and Dean went back, or when Dean went back in time, I want to say it was 1977. John and Mary were already a couple. John was getting ready to propose, so on and so forth. And then, of course, the second time they went back in time, it was either 78 or 79, and Mary was already pregnant with Dean. So if the cutoff point is somewhere in 1977 when Dean goes back in time, that means you've only got 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77. You got 6 seasons to tell that story. Unless, of course, you break each year down into 2 seasons. Because or are they going to continue on with the story after they have kids? Because according to Supernatural, once they had kids, Mary had put the hunting life behind her in some degree. There's an episode where they show Samantha Smith going to hunt a werewolf that was like from her past, that it was just a chapter she had to close, and that's when they introduced this whole other character and some other things that I don't want to get into right now. But for the most part, Mary had given up hunting to have this new life with John. So I'm curious how they're going to try to merge those two worlds. And the reason I say that is because with the CW's recent cancellations of shows that are, some are very young, some are 6, 7 seasons in, it seems that based on the current trend, a lot of shows are not going to make it to the 10-season mark. So I'm curious how they're going to move forward. Are they going to have to tell the story as though every season they got to be prepared that they won't be brought back again? Because that was the way of Supernatural for at least the first 5 seasons. They didn't know if they were going to be over or not. And Eric Kripke only had 5 seasons worth of stories to tell. So from my perspective, they've only got 5 to 6 seasons worth of storytelling. Anything beyond that, you're going to have to sort of either merge the 2 shows, or you're going to have to do something else. But I'm very curious to see what you have to say, because we could sit here and philosophize, wax ecstatic about socio-political content, or we could have fun nerding out about one of our favorite shows and the potential prequel. So I'm very curious to hear what anybody has to say on the subject. If you know my channel, then you know I don't care if you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I just enjoy having the conversations. I enjoy receiving the feedback in the comments section and reading and responding to it. So if you respond to this, I appreciate it, and you're awesome.